the co-host. There we go. Now you have some more power.
Great.
Excellent. So, hi everybody, welcome back. We're gonna get started, and maybe a few folks will trickle in, and that's fine.
Or Ty. And Susan and I will be facilitating many of the sessions that you will see or that you'll have. I'm a former educator. I've been in the education system for over 15 years. Well, I guess I can't say former educator anymore, Susan, because I went back to the school system. I am the COO or director of a local yoga studio, and I'm also working on my doctorate as well, where the title is Whole Leaders Create Whole Schools. I'm really passionate about the work that we do as someone who was in the education field and wasn't taking care of myself, wasn't eating like I was supposed to, wasn't drinking enough water, wasn't exercising, just going. I learned that the wellness piece, the mental wellness, the physical wellness, all of that was a big part of me doing my job and doing my job effectively and efficiently and showing up for my coworkers and for students. So hopefully a lot of information that we bring to you in the next couple of sessions will also spark that in you to make sure you're mentally and physically well throughout this still quarantined at home, work from home situation. But it's good to see everyone, and I'll pass it back over to Susan.
My Zoom popped out there for a minute, so hopefully that won't happen again, but thanks for jumping in, and we'll stay flexible as usual. So thanks, Ty, for jumping in. And I wanted to also just kind of start with, go back, there we go, a poem. So if you can see this or move your gallery around or whatever to read this, let's just take a moment and breathe and read this together. So taking a deep breath just to ground yourself in this moment and in this session together. We had some great time this morning as context for our work together over the next few months. And Taisha and I will keep coming back to the breath. The breath, as we'll learn in a few weeks, is the language of your nervous system. And so you can't just tell yourself in English to calm down. You have to take a deep breath in order for your nervous system to get that message. So I love when Reverend Lynn Unger says in this poem, I didn't say to be calm, right? You can't say calmate or be calm or whatever and just have people react like that. If you have children, you know that you can't just be like, calm down, and they instantly do, right? You have to speak the language of your body or maybe your child or and get that to have the reaction that you need in your nervous system. So the other thing is we have to notice what's going on in our bodies in order to be able to access some emotions and some nervous system solutions. So I'm curious with all of you, and I want you to just open up the chat box so we can share in a nonverbal way right now. And I'd like you to share what is the way that you like to move your body. So it doesn't have to be like exercise, but like it can be, but how do you like to move your body? What gives you pleasure in moving your body, not just like the thing that you do because you have to? So walking my dog, oh, that's such a great one. Stretching, cardio and strength training, walking in nature, Zumba, CrossFit, online instructor that does dance workouts. Ty, we got to talk about that. Exercise. Orange Theory Fitness is hardcore, Beth. I'm a little scared by Orange Theory Fitness, I have to tell you. Also, more walking of the dog. Dogs are so great for mental health and physical health, and getting outside, vitamin N, those are great examples. So moving your body is going to wake up your brain. Moving your body is going to get you in touch with what's going on in your body. I I like, kickboxing, heavy bag workouts, and yoga. I was just going to say, I love yoga as well. And every time I get on my mat, I'm kind of like inventory, like, how are my hips feeling today? Ooh, that pose is stiff. Like, how are my arms? So it's like you do an inventory when you move, right? Just like you stretch in the morning, walking in the woods. Shinrin yoku. Anyone know that term? It means forest bathing in Japanese. And it's actually a thing that is studied. And there's research about. So thanks for sharing all of that. And this is also an exercise of appreciative inquiry, right? Like I asked you what's already going well, what already gives you joy, what you already appreciate and do. And why would I do something like that? You can come off the mic and participate. Why would I ask you what's already going on? What's the point of appreciative inquiry? Awesome. Thanks. Well, I'm realizing I haven't introduced myself, but let's take a quick look at T'Challa's phrase or sort of team care endorsement from Black Panther. Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. So, needless to say, we're in a time in our society where we have a lot of bridges, a lot of walls, a lot of barriers. And we need to look after each other as if we were a single tribe because we are. We are Homo sapiens, the human beings, and we all have human nervous systems. That's something that we all have in common, no matter your age, your gender, your race, and all of the others. So we have to take care of each other as if we're one tribe. And here in America, we are facing divisions deeper than ever before, maybe, or top three. And we need to figure out how we look at the microcosm, which is like our family and our workplace, and how we heal those barriers and divisions in those places to be our impact and our impact on the world. So we met Ty. Ty, I know you have to jump off, so I'm just going to shut up for a second so that you can throw in the words that I know are building up because we usually go back and forth. So is there anything else you want to share with us before I introduce myself and start with our...
Oh, you're doing great.
Oh, you're not even going to let me get a drink of water. Okay, I see how it is, Ty.
I really, I always love that first quote that you share. Just building that bridge and that, as we talk about team care a lot. I think the pandemic sometimes, a couple times during this time has forced me to go inward and not reach out. So building that bridge is very important and recognizing or saying, I'm not okay. You and I talk a lot about, saying those words and being able to say it to your tribe, to the people that are on this journey along with you. So I think that's very important as you go into this session, just to think about and reflect for yourself. How are you building bridges or creating barriers? So that's a good reflection piece.
Great. Thanks, Ty. So Taisha and I actually met through her yoga studio because they were participating in a nonprofit wellness pilot that I was running in 2018, 2019. And but to go back a little bit to introduce you to who I am, you met me this morning. I'm Susan Comfort. I've spent 27 years in nonprofits ever since I graduated from University of North Carolina. And though I grew up in Baltimore, as did Taisha, I say y'all a lot for a bunch of reasons. One, I went to school in North Carolina and I'm allowed. Two, it's gender neutral and that's better than you guys or, whatever. And three, it's informal and I like to be informal. I like to encourage conversation. I want you to come off your mic. This is a small enough group where you can interrupt, ask questions, ask for clarification, etc. So feel free to do that in this group. So in my 27 years in nonprofits, I've done a lot of different work, and I'll tell you three little snapshots. One is that at the beginning of my career, I seesawed between advocacy and service. But my grounding was really out of college doing advocacy and Green Corps and Midwest Academy and altering the relations of power and doing work around not just advocating like for children, which can be a kind of advocacy, but social change and legislative and electoral advocacy to change laws and politicians. And so I had this hard driving kind of like way about me, still do. But then I ran an AmeriCorps program and I was introduced to the world of national service and of advocates on a different level who were advocating as social workers and as caretakers of their communities. And it really introduced me to the difference between, the political world and the service world. And in both worlds, people are burning themselves out left and right. So that's one thing. Another is when I worked for EWG, Environmental Working Group, which some of you may know because of its connection to Parkersburg, West Virginia, and I know some of you are there. The Environmental Working Group was the group that uncovered the DuPont poisoning of the community with PFAS. And I'm out of date on that issue now, but I worked for Environmental Working Group between 2002 and 2009 when this story was being uncovered. And so I'm happy to talk to any of you about it. I'd be very curious about your reactions as community members because I never went there. But I was also having 2 children at the time and working for Environmental Working Group and learning about all these toxic chemicals that are endangering our bodies and our health at the same time that I'm birthing and breastfeeding children was really stressful. And after a while in the environmental movement, all of that stress of like all the things that are bad all day long, every day, I burned out a few times and I decided to go to the world of play because I had small kids and I wanted something more positive, more happy to work on every day than terrible environmental issues that are ruining our lives. And so I worked for Kaboom and Playworks and learned a lot more about brain science through Playworks of developmental, kids and why they need recess, and also about team health. Because, well, I won't go into all the details, but we were sort of judged on team health at Playworks, and I was like, oh, I've never been judged on that before. Like, why is that so important? And so I learned more about organizational culture, and I actually even went back to school at Georgetown to get a certificate in organizational development, organizational consulting, and change leadership, because the way we operate as teams is so important. And if we're not all on the same, rowing together, all on the same page, singing from the same choir book, et cetera, then we're not going to be effective as advocates. So through the pilot where I met Taisha, and through my work and our personal experience, like you've heard about, we really promote team care more than self-care, because we think that taking care of the team is almost more important than us taking care of ourselves for a bunch of reasons. But the one I'll point out to you is we're not good at taking care of ourselves. We're really good at taking care of other people. That's what we do for a living. We advocate for children, or we serve our community, or we take care of our families. But we're not that great at taking care of ourselves. And we'll talk in a later session about team tendency, the 4 tendencies that Gretchen Rubin wrote a book about that some of you might be interested in. And many people in society, the biggest group of the 4 tendencies are called obligers, which are people who are really good at external expectations, but not so good at their own internal goals. And that's me. And once I read this book, I was like, oh, that's why I'm terrible at taking care of myself. Because if I set my own goals, I'm not going to achieve them as easily as if somebody sets them for me. And I'm, like if a professor says, here's what you need to do to get an A, I'll get the A. But if I say, Susan, you should do more yoga, if no one's holding me accountable, it's really hard for me to do that. So that's just, I think in the nonprofit sector, in this education sector, we have a lot of obligers, people who are really good at taking care of other people or achieving external goals, but not so good at self-care. That said, we are going to focus on self-care first, because you all have to understand what it means to change your own habits and understand what it means to take care of yourselves before you can then advocate and lead that right in your workplace. Not really before, like kind of alongside, but today we'll be alongside of each other. So this is the sort of circles that I came up with when I was thinking about how we need to approach this team care, team health aspect. And so first, and some of you noted this on your applications for this program, like wellness, people think about physical fitness or weight loss, and that's not all of what wellness should be, but that is how we take care of our bodies, what we feed it, how we move it, how we rest it. So how we take care of this corpus is very important and affects our mental health greatly. But there are so many things about mental health that are even more important than our sort of physical health as we think about it, even though of course they're related. And we don't talk about that stuff. Why don't we talk about these mental health things at work? And these are both positive and negative, but what are some of the reasons that we don't talk about these mental health things at work? So my contention, and this is a bit controversial, is that red and blue make purple, right? When we talk about our physical health and our mental health at work, we build trust on the team and we build team health. And that can lead to better communication, better management, better professional development, more team building, equity and inclusion, et cetera. Like, I'm not saying that talking about mental health or physical health is the cure-all of all things, but it does play into all of those areas that people tend to have trouble with at work. And in many, as a consultant, as in many workplaces that we consult at, trust is a big issue. And now, on the heels of 2020, not just the pandemic, but also the election season and the racial protests that have roiled our nation, we have more distrust than ever, maybe. And so we've got to figure out ways to build trust. So I'm not saying this is a shortcut, but I am saying this is something that most workplaces aren't yet doing, is looking at wellness as sort of a way, maybe a shortcut, maybe a way around other things to get to that trust that is so elusive in workplaces. Any questions about that before I move on? I didn't even notice the first time our graphic designer did this. She made the team health square green, but she didn't blend the colors. And I was like, can we blend the colors? Wait, what is green and red? And what is green? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, red and blue make purple. We got to do this over again. So that's one of the reasons why purple is a color that we use a lot. So I promised you this Brene Brown quote, and I grabbed a few things off my bookshelf because some of you were asking about Brene Brown. I am like whoever shared this morning. Brene Brown kept getting talked about, and I was like, who is this person? And so finally I started looking into her, and now I'm like a groupie. I've got Daring Greatly and Rising Strong and The Gifts of Imperfection. Like I said, she has a Netflix special, so I really encourage you to, and she's super funny. She's a Texan, so she says y'all all the time, and she tells stories of her own, vulnerability, and is a comedian in many ways. So I think you'll really enjoy her work. And the quote here is what we were talking about all morning, right? That vulnerability is not a weakness. It's actually the flip side of courage. You can't have courage without vulnerability. And vulnerability creates empathy, right? If I tell you that I am struggling with how much alcohol to drink in my life, I happened to stop drinking 3 years ago, but I was struggling with this 3 years ago. What's my relationship to alcohol? Then you might go, oh, I can empathize with her because I have a sister who also struggles with that, or I have, also struggled with that in my life, or I have heard of people or love people, right? And so that vulnerability that I shared creates empathy. And then if you know that about me and you know that I'm willing to tell you that, you might trust me a little bit more. That might not be the best example, but I think you get the idea. And so the more we can be vulnerable with each other, the more courageous we can be, the more empathy is created, and then the more trust is built. So let's go back to you. These are your words that are not attributed here, but we really appreciate you sharing honestly about where you are in your workplace and what you want to get out of this program. And then we also asked you 3 challenges that you're facing right now. So I just want to feedback typical organizational development stuff, like feedback what you said. And some of you will see and recognize some of these words as your own, and some of you will see and empathize with these words. They're not your own, but you can totally relate. So I'll let you read them on your own, and I'll just animate them in. So on to the challenges that you mentioned more recently. All right. So let me just go back for a second. So that's the full, not the full list. I didn't include every single thing, but I think it's a good snapshot. Would anyone like to add anything that might not be on this list or maybe didn't make the list that kind of isn't represented here? It's already kind of a big list, but there, you might have thought of something new. So anyone want to add or comment on what is here? I did this so I can get a drink of water, y'all, and you're not pitching in for me. But you're also welcome to take yourself off mute at any time. So thanks for doing it both ways.
Happy to.
Yeah. Yeah, these are all I can say that, what we'll do over the next few months will address these things. We might not, fix them all perfectly, but you all are going to have a lot of ideas for each other, partially because you are in the same area, geographic area, and you will have relationships or recommendations or cultural realities that you'll know about that you can exchange with each other. But you'll also have real examples from your workplaces. And I can give you tons of examples from groups that we've worked with, but I really want to bring out the examples that you all have. So some of you might not be facing these challenges in your workplace because you've already figured out something to address them. And so I really want to encourage the sharing of all of your ideas and examples, including the failures. Please keep the failures coming, because this is our group where we can share those failures and we learn almost more from failures than we do from succeeding. The experts say we definitely learn more from failures. So we'll keep the space and conversation and in breakout rooms for those things to be discussed. So this is just like the titles really of the 4 trainings that Taisha and I have put together and tested and reworked and tweaked over the last year. We're constantly tweaking them. But we basically came up with a tree metaphor that we like to focus on. And so many of you like to walk in nature. And I hope we can talk at another time about Shinrin Yoku and ecotherapy, because if you're already out there walking in nature, you are getting some incredible benefits that you might not be aware of. And if you were aware, maybe you would do it even more, do it longer. So trees are super important for the health of the ecosystem, as well as a great metaphor for our trainings. So we're going to start in a few weeks, 2.5 weeks, with the roots of self-care. So what are the ways that you're getting nutrients literally into your body from those tap roots of the tree that go down into the earth? What are the ways that we are feeding our bodies in order that we can survive and thrive with our mental health? And then the neuroscience is also a big focus of that first session. So we go into the nervous system, quick touch on polyvagal theory. We talk about cortisol. We talk about the 3 kinds of stress, physical, chemical, and emotional. And it's not like, a neuroscience seminar or anything, but this is the kind of thing I love to read about. And so it's fun to go over it, but also as a grounding for why we have to address the stress in our lives, because it's a serious physical health issue. The second series, or the second training in the series, focuses on the stressor scorecard. And that is an assessment tool that we created based on the ACE scorecard. And if you know reactions on Zoom, you can always put those up in your box. But if you can raise your hand or do a reaction if you know what the ACE scorecard is. I'm just kind of curious with this group. There's a lot of advocates, so I expect that some of you already do. Great. If you've about half. So the ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's a measurement of childhood trauma. We do have a copy of it on our website along with all of these other resources. And it's simply a 10-question scorecard that if you experienced any of these traumas before the age of 18, you get 1 point for each question. And it's a study over many years by CDC and Kaiser that shows the correlation between the higher your ACE score, the more likely or almost assured you are to struggle with mental and physical health problems. It's a trigger warning, however. The ACE scorecard is very graphic. It is about domestic violence. It is about drug and alcohol addiction and incarceration. And so you have to treat it with care if you bring it up in the workplace. And we also have to consider workplaces. Like I've talked about the ACE scorecard in schools and nonprofits and in corporations. And depending on the culture of those institutions, it might go very well because they understand the need for this conversation, or it might go very poorly because they weren't prepared for it, or they weren't, or it's too much too soon because they're not there yet as a culture, or they don't understand the importance of it. Why are we talking about this at work? We don't deal with traumatized children. We do not need to talk about this. We do not need to talk about my trauma, right? So we'll talk through all of that and also give you an alternative to the ACE scorecard, which is the resilience assessment, which is something not scientific that was created to also show some of the resilience factors that you were exposed to as a kid. But anyway, the point is the stressor scorecard measures what is it that brings us stress? Identity and circumstance are the two kind of categories, but who you are in the world, whether you're a woman or a person of color or a religious minority or a political minority or someone in the immigration system, whatever your identity is might bring you stress. So you get to score how much stress that brings. And then there's circumstance, stuff we go through. I went through a divorce 10 years ago. That caused a ton of stress. It also caused financial problems. That caused a whole other layer of stress. But these things are temporary. They're not part of my identity. And so we have to acknowledge sometimes, like, yeah, I'm going through a tough time, or I have a food allergy that is a circumstance that I'm going to get through. But right now, you all need to be aware that sometimes I'm just going to have to hop off camera and go to the bathroom. That's not the case for me, but like that's something that where it might come up, right, at work, that's a reason to talk about some of these things. So anyway, that's going to build your branches of resilience, because if we can look at our stress sources, not just as sources of stress, but as opportunities to reframe. Like, I have a food allergy. What an opportunity for me to learn about nutrition, right? Or and this is true for me, I'm a part of the LGBTQ community. That might cause stress in certain environments, but it actually brings me a lot of joy. I live in the Washington, D.C. area where people are very open to LGBTQ families. And so I don't have to worry that much about stress, but I can enjoy the community that I have here that identifies with me in that way, right? So there's ways we can reframe stress and recast it in our lives, and that's sort of what that session focuses on. The team care one is my favorite because that's where, after having done some of this work with ourselves, and there'll be some homework in between, we can really talk about how do we bring it back to the team. There are, simple assessments like plus deltas, and figuring out how to apply that to wellness, doing other things around habit change with your team, figuring out the right ways based on your experiences and other, wellness knowledge in the world. How do we bring that to our team and continue it so that it's sustainable and it's not super expensive, and it's something that we can do ourselves, not something that we have to hire consultants out of, Cleveland or DC or whatever to do. And then finally, the basis of most health and whether is how we move our bodies and how we are mindful. Most sort of wellness experts would agree that mindfulness is a very simple but incredibly powerful tool for mental health, and movement is a very diverse and can be simple or can be complicated, but it's an incredibly important magic potion for our health. So that fourth session really focuses on why that is. what is brain derived neurotrophic factor and why do we want to get it through exercise? What is the research on mindfulness and why do we have to focus on this? Like, I'm a kind of person, I want to know why before I have to do something. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into the whys on those two things. All right, so we're going to move on. This is going to be your homework. I'm just giving you a sneak preview. You can either download this from our website, but I think Amy's also going to send it out after this session. But what we're going to do now is talk about some of these solutions. This is a personal stress prescription because everybody's solutions for wellness are different. And some of these things in our lives, some things we need to increase. Like you might need to increase your spiritual practice because you've let that slide and realized in the last year you really need that grounding. You really want the comfort of those songs or of those rituals or of that community, right? You might need to decrease some of these things. You might need to decrease intoxicants like I decided to do, or you might need to decrease some friendships that are kind of toxic, that are draining energy from you. So this is where you're going to see how you're doing on some of these things. And some of these you're like, nah, that's not for me. I'm not interested in visual or performing arts at all. And some of you will be like, I got to watch more Broadway shows or whatever it is. So where are you? And where do you want to make changes is kind of your homework. Really, I just want you to pick 3 because it's overwhelming to try to do the whole list. Right. So you could look at the whole list, but I really just want you to think of 3 shifts that you might make, and especially small goals, because we'll talk about with habit change that small goals are way more achievable and give you the dopamine hit when you achieve them than big goals. And so if you say, I want to exercise more, that's you're going to fail in some way and then you'll feel bad about it. But if you say, I want to do 1 push-up per day, that's my goal, that's an achievable goal. And maybe you'll do 2 push-ups. Maybe you'll do 10. But if you set the goal at 1 and then you do it, you get a dopamine hit and you're more likely to do it the next day. So set your goals as small and as achievable as possible. You can always add on. So now we're going to go to breakout rooms and you're getting randomly assigned. And I think the system randomly assigns Amy and I too. But part of the structure of this training is to ask you all to come out of your comfort zones. Because even though you're the wellness contact and the wellness person, you're going to be asking other people in the office, in your workplaces, to do something that they're not totally comfortable with. So I want to make you a little bit uncomfortable just so that you can get the experience of why is she asking me to do that? Right? Why do I have to say this? Or why do I have to get up and stretch? It's because you're going to be asking people to do things that they're like, why is she asking me to do this? Or he. So if I make you uncomfortable, it's sort of by design, or I might just be annoying. I don't know, one or the other. So thank you for sharing. And I'm going to share my screen again. Because our next, let me get it in present mode. There we go. I hooked up my clicker while we were gone. Going backwards, not forwards. There we go. I wanted to share, are any of you aware of Resmaa Menakem? He just came into my awareness in the last year, especially around the Black Lives Matter protests. And I read or I listened to his book, My Grandmother's Hands. And he's a therapist who focuses on communities of color and on generational trauma. So how trauma is stored in our bodies, not just in communities of color, but that's who he focuses his practice on, but in all communities that experience trauma, how that trauma is passed on in our DNA. It was hard for me to even understand how that could happen, but his work is really amazing in that way. So this quote is about what we're just talking about. We have to observe our bodies and be aware of where we are and whether we're settled, so that we can make other people feel settled around us. And many of you are in workplaces that deal with trauma directly, where you're dealing with secondary trauma on your staff, where you, even in that social media feed, right? When we scroll through, we have no idea when we're going to be traumatized or triggered. because it just jumps out, and there it is. Somebody put something on their Facebook page that's, in communities of color, when Black Lives Matter protests were going on, like, people had to do incredible self-care to, like, not expose themselves to certain videos, pictures, headlines, and then keeping certain things from your kids, or making it appropriate to, so we have to, like, put up the boundaries just to not trigger ourselves unnecessarily sometimes. But noticing when we're triggered or noticing when we're stressed is an incredibly important skill. And even if we don't know what to do about it, just noticing that mindfulness of what's going on is a big victory, and something that we need to practice in order to get good at. So I really encourage you to check out Resmaa Menakem as well. So this is where, and Amy, I'd love to know what else you added to the list. I started with the list that I sent to you, Amy, and I thought I'd just quickly run through, like, what I meant by those things, and then you can add some of the things that you and Delaney also thought about, because what we're going to do next after this list is do some ranked choice voting, where you can say what you would like some more training on or some more experience with during the course of this program. And what we'd like to do also is, instead of me inviting everybody from DC or Baltimore to do it online, we want to build connections with the Mid-Ohio Valley providers of these services, and have you build relationships with local folks that do this work, so that you can consider bringing them to your workplace online or in person, or that you can support, local providers. So when I provided an initial list of possibilities to Amy and Delaney, I thought chair yoga has been very popular in our work, or gentle yoga. And since we're sitting so much, in fact, let's just stand up while we look at this list, because I can't sit this long. I changed locations from my dining room because it was a little cold in here. But we sit so much, and they say sitting is the new smoking. And I can tell you from all my yoga, this last year has tightened up my hips. Like, I'm like a beginner again on some of these yoga poses, because so yoga is a great solution, but it's not for everybody. Qigong is an ancient energy sort of management practice that's similar to Tai Chi, but it's actually simpler. And so it's easier to teach online, or, to a group that is not aware of any, movement or flowing practices. And so Qigong is also an opportunity for people to do something new together. Like, if you have a yoga class, some people are like, I love yoga, and other people are like, I already hate yoga, or I don't know, but they have, like, preconceived opinions about it. But if you do something that no one's heard of or no one's tried before, everyone's like, what is it? I don't know, let's go. Okay, that was cool, that was weird. Whatever their reaction is, they have it together. So that's another reason why we like to encourage new things. So high intensity workouts with low impact options are great, because it forces people to sweat together. And like Taisha says, when people sweat together, they bond. They've gone through something intense together, and they can complain about their sore muscles later, or they can, reflect on the joke the teacher made together. And Taisha is a Pilates teacher, and I've gone to her class, and I have hated her so much during the class. And then at the end, I love her so much, because I feel so good when it's done. And she always plays a cool song and says inspiring things. And I'm like, oh, that was so great. But in that moment, I hated it. So strong reactions to workouts, but they are important for our health, and can bring teams together. So mindfulness practices are fantastic, and getting someone to work with you or your group or your team, or even you don't have to get a live person. You can get videos or Headspace or Calm. There's lots of ways to do mindfulness practices, but it's a great way for teams to practice, is to do it together. Juggling, we just led a juggling workshop yesterday we've done it for kids, for schools, for workplaces, and you can do it with just, I put my bags away, but you can do it with just plastic grocery bags, or these like play scarves, because they stay in the air longer. They don't fall down as fast as balls, and you can learn the neural pathways that it takes to juggle. So that's fun to do online as a team. Again, something new. Making art, it could be drawing, it could be painting, it could be a lot of things. We even do upcycling art sessions where you're taking paper out of your recycled bin and making envelopes and cards out of it. But doing that together can be a good practice. Yoga Nidra is actually a guided relaxation meditation practice. Also might be something new for folks. It's more appropriate like at home for an online thing than like in the workplace where everyone would have to like lie down on the floor and might feel weird for people. Drumming is linked to antidepressive reactions in people. There's been research on drumming, and even though I'm not a drummer, there are lots of ways that drummers can teach folks simple drumming skills, and that can be a way to tap in to the sort of music brain and that rhythmic ability and roots that we all have. And a great way to, again, bring a team together around something that might be new for them. Improv scares people, but basically when you ask an icebreaker question, like when I asked you how you like to move your body, that was improv. You didn't know you were going to be asked that, and I asked you to come up with something on the spot, right? So it can be as simple as a check-in question or as, involved as like a game. And so we have an improv class that's sort of meant for teamwork and meant for workplaces. But there are lots of improv teachers, including Second City has a great workplace program now where they go in probably for a lot of money and teach mostly corporations to do this stuff. By the way, that's why I started this work. There's all this corporate wellness stuff out there because corporations have budgets for this because it's a retention tool for them or a recruitment tool for them. Nonprofits don't have those budgets. We don't have, we just like work harder and serve more people, but we're not spending money on ourselves, and we're not, we don't have a $7 billion corporate wellness industry to serve us. And then mindful plant minding is something that a lot of folks have asked for, not in this group, but in general. And gardening has really taken off in the last year of folks as folks have been closer to home. So we like to be inclusive and just focus on container gardening and houseplants because not everybody has space to garden. And there's a lot of variations in ecosystems and stuff. So, but maybe there's somebody who in your ecosystem could provide like an outside gardening training. So that's just more, an idea there. So Amy, would you like to chime in about some of the other options that you and Delaney put on the list that people might vote on? And again, there's lots of ways to be mindful. And I love, Amy, that you separated mindfulness and meditation on the menu because they're different. Mindfulness is simply the non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. And meditation is more of a practice where you're going deeper and actually altering your mental state. But mindfulness is just the present moment. It can be any present moment. This present moment where you're listening to my voice and sitting in a training. It can be cooking. It can be walking your dog. It can be exercise. You can have mindfulness every moment that you're conscious and awake. So we're going to practice something just called mindful listening. And if you're finished with your survey, you can really focus on this. And if you're still finishing it up, then you can join in the mindfulness when you submit question number 2. So the idea here is to just listen to the song. And you might need to give your brain a job. And if so, you can pick a percussion cymbal to follow, like follow the hi-hat cymbal, or maybe follow or count the beat if you need to give your brain a job to focus on the song. But if you want, or if you can, just listen and enjoy the song. It's mindful listening. Like try not to check your email or do other things. You're just listening to this song. And we'll only play about 2.5 minutes of it. It's the drum track of a song that you may have heard. Oops. Sorry about that. guess it decided we're not going to listen to 2.5 minutes of that song. That's fine. I was just a little shocked there. I thought it would keep going. Sorry about that. But that was just a quick glimpse then, about a minute and a half of mindful listening. Any observations about your experience in that last minute and a half? Who wants to share? To each of you is in the next 2 weeks. Listen to one song mindfully. So you get to pick the song. Maybe it's a classical music, maybe it's a jazz, maybe it's something with words, although I will warn you that songs with words force your brain to think because you're thinking about the words, and that might like bring up memories or thoughts of people. And so mindful listening with word music is, I think, a little bit harder. And you don't need to make it harder for yourself because this is already really hard. So I recommend songs without words, without lyrics. This was a track of a song that does have lyrics. And so you can even find the instrumental track, if you'd like, of a favorite song to remove the words and have a different experience with that song. And the goal is not to remove all thoughts from your mind while you listen to the song. It's simply to do what Amy did and what others have shared, which is to notice what your mind wants to do when you're trying to simply be present in this moment of this song. Just noticing what your mind is doing, that's the job. Because usually when we're not practiced at this, like our mind starts doing what's called monkey mind, jumps around to all these different things. And that's the habit that we're in. That's the way we've trained our mind to be. So don't be mad at your mind when it does that. It's the way you've trained it for a long time. And so just focusing on one thing at a time is really hard for us as humans, right? And as Americans in 2021. So that's one piece of homework, is to listen to a song mindfully. You can do it every day. You can do it one time. I recommend just seeing how you feel, but practicing. So that's just one example of like a mindfulness exercise that we like to do in our trainings as something that you can, you might not be interested in meditation, but you might be interested in mindful walks or mindful music or something else that is in the same category, but not like sitting on a cushion and spending 40 minutes, which is what a lot of people think meditation needs to be. I'm not a huge practitioner of meditation. I'm a big practitioner of mindfulness, though. So here's a quote. I'll always sprinkle my slides with quotes and poems, songs. And this is a picture that I took in the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens in DC in the height of the bloom of the summer lotus season. They have all these lotus ponds in the aquatic gardens right in the middle of DC, across from, well, it doesn't matter. But I went there with my daughter one morning, so that we were there like early, and we got to see the height of the blooms, and we were still socially distancing, so everybody had to kind of time their entrance into the gardens. But that time when my daughter and I could just be together and just look at these flowers and just hang out and have this really cool experience together was a precious gift to both of us. And I think you all know that, when you're in the presence of someone who focuses their full attention on you, you really feel seen and heard. And as advocates and as nonprofit practitioners, like, we often, with our colleagues, with our families, even with our clients or constituents, we sometimes don't give them our full attention. We're sometimes not mindfully present with them. And, whether they know that they notice it or not, the other people notice it. They might not know that they notice it, but their nervous system, their vagus nerve, and we'll talk more about this on February 16th, their vagus nerve can feel and gather that information from your body language and from your eye movements, right? And so being fully present and giving that gift of your presence to another human is transformative in relationships. So there's a reason that we focus on mindfulness, not just for all the brain science reasons of it gives us more focus and it helps retrain our brain, etc., but because it actually helps repair and build relationships with other humans. And that's what we need for team care. We want them to bloom like flowers, the folks we're working with and the folks that we're working for every day, and the ones that work for us, right? If you're a manager, giving your full attention to one of your employees or your direct reports can be transformational for them. And this, some of you were exposed to Amanda Gorman during the inauguration, and I just wanted to share another poem as we're closing up. And I'm happy to email this out if you'd like to, or you can look it up. But this is just a beautiful, hopeful poem, and that she wrote. I'm sorry, I got the age wrong. She's actually 22 now, which means she couldn't have been 19 last year when she wrote this. So that should be 21 or 20. But she wrote this at the beginning of the pandemic, and it moves me. So, Amy, I want to toss it back to you to see if you need more time. We could take a break now, or we could do the results of the poll and finish up a little early and not take a break. What would you? How would you like to? We have just a few more slides from me, but there's not, aside from debriefing what the poll results were, and then giving the homework. We're going to wrap up after that. So, how would you like to manage the rest of our time? During the morning, so that you all, because that's part of our train the trainer approach, is to put you all through it as a group, and then you debrief your own experience and this group's experience, so that you learn, oh, that's the way I should facilitate it with my group, or oh, I see why she said that, and ask the question in an open-ended way, and that's what we should do with our group, so that you're ready, having gone through it, to then go lead it, for your team. And so, because I used to work for Playworks, which is all about recess games, I have a lot of games and activities and icebreakers that many of them can be adapted for online. And so we will be doing some of those together, and some of them you'll like, and some of them you'll be like, but you'll have a diversity of experiences from this program that you can then evaluate yourself and say, yeah, that would work with our group, or no, that wouldn't work for us. And the question came up about forest bathing. I think I don't speak Japanese, but Shinrin Yoku is the term that the Japanese came up with, that I think translates to forest bathing, which is weird, sounds weird to our ears, Americans. It's like, do you take a bath in the forest? Do you roll around in leaves? But it's just spending time among trees. And again, trees as a metaphor, trees give off certain enzymes, and the Shinrin Yoku belief is that we benefit from those enzymes. And you can even think of the gases, like trees release oxygen and then we breathe it in. And so not only chemically are trees improving us, but also spiritually or meditatively, spending time in nature, having our eyes focus on, if you're near a window, just look out the window right now. Don't look at me. Look out the window at something far away. Your eyes are going to focus differently on that thing far away. And you really need that to counteract the looking at a screen 2 feet away from you for 8 hours a day. So there are lots of reasons to spend time in nature, and scientifically they're starting to be proven. We've just kind of like known it for years, but Oh, I was looking for, I guess I moved it. I was looking for my Hidden Life of Trees book, which, if you really like trees, read The Overstory by Richard Powers or The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter something something, for a German name, who's a forester. I don't know where I moved that book. Um, and there's fascinating information and research that we know now about trees and how they both impact the health of the planet as well as our health as humans. So I'll stop rambling about trees, but it is.
Oh no, I want to go on because I have something very interesting to add about trees.
Oh, great. Add it. Go for it.
So years ago, I went to a Chinese medical practitioner, and one of the major things that she identified that I was missing at the time was time with trees, and particularly coniferous. And she like prescribed for me to go spend more time with the pines. Seriously.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, there are prescription. I mean, there are doctors. There's a movement of medical practitioners that have named nature vitamin N, and they give nature prescriptions, like to children, like please go play in a park 3 times a week, or please go walk in a forest. Um, so yeah, that's fascinating to know that you got that prescription as well. And on our personal self prescription, which is the other piece of your homework, and so I'll just share that too, since we're nearing time. Whoops, I just shared all of you to you instead of my screen to you. Is There we go. Thank you, Amanda Gorman. Oh, and here's another quote. This is a Baltimore guy, Tim Kreider. Says, idleness is not just a vacation, an indulgence, or a vice. It is as indispensable to the brain as vitamin D is to the body. And deprived of it, we suffer a mental affliction as disfiguring as rickets. So, I like lists of 3. So listening to a song mindfully, doing your personal stress prescription, and then being idle. That's your other homework. Just like build in some idleness time and see what happens. Maybe you'll just sleep. Maybe you'll think of some thoughts. Maybe you'll have an insight or a new idea or decide to do something creative. I don't know, but mark out some idleness time in the next 2 weeks. Might only be 10 minutes. It might be an hour. It might be a day.
Can you define idle for us? Because I'm pretty sure that you don't mean first, it's just us and our phone.
Right, correct. I mean, imagine like you're 8 years old and you're strapped in the backseat of the car and there's no phones or iPads. Like you're stuck. You don't have a plan. You're just idle. So it doesn't mean that you have to be sitting, stationary for an hour, but there's no plan. You could be sitting in your yard. You could be walking around the neighborhood. You could be sitting on your couch, but you're idle, and it's not on your calendar, and you don't have an agenda. So like that's why the hammock is up there. Like if you're just lying in the hammock, not reading a book, you're idle. But I won't force you to be stationary. I'll just force you to not have a phone or an agenda. How about that? So the homework is, again, the personal stress prescription. And Amy, if you want to send that around, or if you're interested in previewing the other resources, you're welcome to go to our page. It does ask for an email address, but then it takes you to the downloads page where you can download anything for free. And over the course of our sessions, we'll be using these for you, but also debriefing and talking about how we bring them to a team and what are the some pitfalls, what are some mistakes I've made in facilitating some of these things, and Taisha as well, that we can share with you so that you can avoid them or make different mistakes at least. And then also we'll debrief with each other. So when we're in this smaller group, we'll be able to say, oh, I asked our staff to do the personal stress prescription after our discussion, and I got this kind of pushback. What should I do? Or, we didn't add this to the list, so I suggest we add this to the personal stress prescription, right? You're going to give feedback on how it goes, with your team, and what sort of it opens up for discussion in the process. So again, this is about the roots of self-care. That's why the roots are on it. And we always start with what feeds us, both as individuals, but also as leaders of this work by virtue of you being in this Zoom room today. We want you to start with you and move out to the rest of the team. So hopefully you'll experience some sort of insight from just going through the list. And then maybe you'll have some other insight from like doing the thing. Maybe it's a decrease of something, or maybe it's an increase of something, but whatever that thing is, including idleness, you might have some insight that comes from doing the thing. And the column of how often or by when is also important in your goal setting, because you want to say, I want to do this every day, or I want to do this by the end of next week, or I want to, revisit my friend list, by the end of the year. And that way you can set your goal in your head for like a deadline or something to shoot for. But again, make it achievable. Don't make grandiose goals, because we just set ourselves up for failure. I've done it so many times.
That I need to justify it too. And also so that we can just inform our own work.
Great. I wanted to mention, some of you might have heard of this. This is the book that got me started on this whole journey. Have any of you seen this book or heard about Beth Kanter? And so Beth has, this is now probably 4 years old, this book, and it went to press before all of the stress of the last 4 years. So, but it is a good resource, and has some assessments in it as well, and lots of stories from other nonprofits about what they did to improve wellness practices. I will say it's mostly physical wellness practices that these examples focus on, because that's the most accessible thing that is accepted in workplaces, right? And it's mostly about sort of self-care, because that's how we think about wellness. But when we do it together, it's team care. And so where I'm going to push us to go is in a slightly more vulnerable, yes, and I will put my email in there. Thanks for asking. A slightly more vulnerable direction, which is where we're going to talk about mental health and physical health. And we're going to take it from the self to the team and ask, our teams to do some different things, not dramatically risky, but different things so that we can continue these conversations at the workplace and support each other there. But that was Happy Healthy Nonprofit might be a resource that you all could order for your office or show to your boss, or, get some more ideas in the meantime, because it's going to take a few months for us to go through these sessions. So you might want like a quick hit of ideas, and Happy Healthy Nonprofit is a good one for that. So I just want to introduce just one more grounding mindfulness exercise to us today before we go. And this is something that you can do with kids. And it's actually great in schools to sort of reduce kids' anxiety, because if someone's going in, and adults too, if we're going into an anxiety spiral, we're going into the prefrontal cortex of our brain, where we ruminate and we worry and we make lots of plans, and then we revise the plans, and then we imagine the ultimate terrible outcome that could come from that plan. We worry. And so to break ourselves out of that rumination cycle, it's recommended that you come back to your senses, come back to the present moment, and really be grounded in where you are rather than what could be, right? So the exercise is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And some of you may have done this before. It's very common. So first, and we'll do this together. And here, let me put my address in there in case somebody needs to leave. First, it's noticing 5 things you can see. So it can get people out of an anxiety spiral. So I encourage you to use that yourself, introduce it to your clients, to kids, etc. And you can even, do counting this way, bring in like a kinesthetic thing. Anyway, it's 2:58. So we're gonna wrap up. But are there any questions, clarifying questions about the homework or about what's next in the program? And I put my email just to one person instead of to all of you. Sorry. And you can of course follow up with Amy or I afterwards with any other questions that you have. All right. Let it be known that I ended early, Amy.